Qlik Dork back again, and today, my friends, we are looking at the OpenAI block inside of Qlik application automation. We're going to be looking at three different blocks today. We're going to be looking at the chat completion message block, the chat completion block, as well as the raw API request block. The first one we're going to start with is the chat completion message. I was asked to do this by a friend who said, hey, I'm looking at this and it looks like chat completion and chat completion message to do the same thing. What in the world are these two different blocks? Because these are new things. And so if you look at the chat completion message block, you might think that it's intended to go off and ask OpenAPI your prompt and get you your dad joke. Well, this block is actually intended, as it says here, to generate a chat completion message for the chat completion block. It's not intended to go really to OpenAI and run the prompt. It's going to try to prepare the message that then gets passed. Well, what happens is if I'm looking at this thing, I give it the content, tell me a dad joke about softball. I can also pass other parameters. Well, how do I know what parameters can be there? Like anything, you can always say, hey, give me the API request, go look that up. In this case, it actually will pop up the message for you. And it'll show me things like, hey, you can set the max tokens. I'm paying for OpenAI out of my pocket. I don't want this guy running for 4 hours and burning up my credit card, that's for sure. And I'm sure you'd want to do the same thing in your environment, set some limits as to what you're doing. But when I look at this, it also says, hey, guess what? Not only did these things come out new, the week after we created this new stuff, we created even newer stuff called responses. And so if you're getting started, you might want to do responses. Well, when I come back and look at my list, responses isn't one of the things in my list. And that's why we always provide this raw API request. So we're going to use that to call the newer model called responses. Well, all I had to do was put in the information I want for my content. It's going to build a message. What I then do is take that message that's a single message, and I need to create that as part of a variable called messages that is a list variable. So if I were to look at this, you would see that is a list. And so the first thing I always would do with a list is empty it. And then I'm going to add that message so it creates an array. That array then gets passed as the messages, and then you can choose the model that you want to use. And there's some other parameters that you can use for that. And again, you can always go look at the documentation and know what all these other things are that you might want to do. Well, if I go ahead and save this and run it, if I go look at this and I look at the output, hey, guess what? I got my question answered in a roundabout way because I used the chat message block to build the message. Well, the great thing is I don't have to necessarily do that. I might do that if I'm doing, I want to control some other things, but I can call the chat completion block on its own. And instead of using the messages that were compiled as part of that create message, I can just pass it an array myself. And I have to use these brackets, square brackets for JSON that says, here's your array. And oh, by the way, here's the messages that I want to do. I can have multiple messages in there. It just has to be wrapped by this. Notice that this even says, hey, you can give me a list of messages manually, or you can also call the chat completion block. By the way, the chat completion block is going to create one message, not an array. So be sure to use the variable list type so that you can do that. I get to then choose the model that I want, and it'll do a lookup. As part of your OpenAI, you can, when you do your connection, you create an API key, you can define which models are allowed to be used. And so when it goes and does a lookup, it's only going to find the models that are part of that API key that are allowed. So you can limit the models that are in that list that way. And so I'm going to save this. And now instead of doing the chat message first, we're just going to call it chat completion directly. I'm going to run this guy. Let me do a refresh here. And now I'm going to go ahead and look down here. And sure enough, hey, why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself? It was too tired. That's a great dad joke if I've ever heard a dad joke. So I'm going to get rid of that thing. And like I said, we want to do is they've got a brand new one called responses that has even more parameters available for you. Well, the way that this works is it says, hey, you only need to provide the path for me. You're not providing the entire URL like you would in our other call URL functions that are in the basic blocks. I'm just calling responses, and it's going to fill in the rest of that prior to responses, and it needs a body. And I want to have a joke about popsicles this time. I'm all about that. And again, as always, I can always go refer to the link of what it's going to call for this raw API. Well, let me save this and go ahead and run. Sure, here's a popsicle dad joke for you. Why'd the popsicle go to school? Because it was be a smart sickle. Uh, okay, that would be a dud one. The kids would be booing me. So that's your three different functions. Remember, chat completion message, that block is to create a message that's going to get passed to chat completion. It is not running on its own. If you need the newer, latest, greatest, up-to-date, raw things that it does, you're going to want to call the responses API, and we've not added the responses block yet. I'm sure that's coming soon. But you can call these things that are later, greater than what may always be there. And we've got these blocks for just about all of our connectors, and it's simple to call as well. Hope that you have a great day.